Trece is a Filipino comic series written by Budget Tan and illustrated by Cajo Baldissimo. It tells the story of Alexandra Trece, a detective who deals with crimes of supernatural origin. Its first issue was published in October 22nd, 2005, starting off as a niche work which grew in popularity as readers were intrigued first by the first 2 volumes' focus on Manila's urban legends, and then by the later volumes' development of Alexandra Trece as a character. The series went on to win several accolades. Netflix made it an animated adaptation on June 11, 2001, as both Tan and Baldissimo as its showrunners, and Jay Olivia as the executive producer. Now you're probably thinking, hello, what the hell does any of this have to do with what you're talking about? Well, thank you so much for asking. Recently, I was rewatching Trece, and I noticed something. Because it is a Filipino, technically comic series that started this Netflix animation, I was looking for, the actual comic series. They're not hard to find, they're just, you really gotta look for them. And the more I was looking for them, the more I kept reading about them, the more I realized something. It actually is very, very heavily, Southeast Asian inspired. And you might be thinking, well, that's great. What does any of that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, the reason why I bring it up is twofold. Number one is because Southeast Asia really does not, get good representation. I was actually talking about this to a friend before I started writing this script and basically recording this video, and their response to me saying they don't really get good rep was, oh, but what about Raya and the Last Dragon? To which I looked at them and I was like, ooh, no, that is not. There's a bunch of creators here on YouTube of Southeast Asian descent who tore into that movie and were explaining why, nah, my guy, is bad. Now, I need to stress this, right? Because if you've been on the channel for a bit, you'll know this, right? I am not Southeast Asian. I am a half Hispanic, half white woman. Meaning, my 2 cents that I'm about to give, if anybody of Southeast Asian descent says my 2 cents is worthless, then you need to take their word for it, because I am giving my 2 cents under the absolute knowledge that it might mean nothing, and I'm okay with that. But the reason why I want to bring this up is because Southeast Asia is wildly divorced from what I like to call the mainstream Asian countries we know about. Now you must be thinking, what is mainstream Asian? China, Japan, the Koreas, Vietnam, right? The quote-unquote mainstream. Everybody knows about them and all this other stuff. Did you know that there are literally hundreds of countries that make up Southeast Asia? Just the Philippines alone consists of about 7,641 individual islands that are more or less broadly categorized under 3 main geographical divisions because of just how the islands look. Now you must be thinking, that's great, but why do we care? Thank you so much for asking. Trece is very heavily Filipino, and what I mean by this is, it takes a lot of the fact that the Philippines was divided up and conquered so many different times by a bunch of different people that realistically, their culture was heavily influenced by it. Now, I can hear you, scratching your head. I'll explain really fast. The Spanish explorer Ruy Lopez de Villalobos, I think I said that wrong, during his expedition in 1542, named the islands of Leyte and Samara Philippines, after Philip II of Spain, and then the Prince of Asturias, Asturias. I'm gonna not even pretend I said that right. Let's pretend I did, though. Eventually, the name Las Islas Filipas would be converted to the archipelago's Spanish possessions. Before Spanish rule was established, other names, like the Western Islands and Eastern Islands respectively, were used to describe the Philippines as a whole. Now you must be thinking, that's great! What does that matter? Well, prior to this guy just showing up out of the blue to do his conquering nonsense in 1542, the Philippines were a very large, well-established, country all on their own. I know that's weird to say, because a lot of people, look at you and go, so? So? That's important. Here, right, real quick TLDR. Before England, Spain, France, and all these other places decided to get their heart on for the conquering business, realistically, most places prior to being conquered had their own entire communities, had their own entire way of doing things. They were very content being all by their lonesome and doing their own stuff. And then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. In this case, the conquering nations. But why were they conquering? Spices. Realistically, spices were the name of the game. Spices, I might add, that not only did they not want, they tried them a little bit and they were like, nope, that's way, way too spicy. We don't like it. However, by the time any of that happened, so many of the Filipino culture was influenced by these conquerors, which is why you have a mix of French, Hispanic, and also, like, actual Filipino last names in the Philippines. Isn't because they're trying to be weird and everything, it's because literally this has been, like, their culture for a little bit, and by a little bit I mean, like, the 1500s to, like, 1946. Yes, Spanish and American colonial rule happened from 1565 to 1946. They were there a long time. So, when somebody tries to tell me, that doesn't sound right, do you know that one of the main languages in the Philippines is actually English, and Spanish, and French? They have a lot of different languages that they can speak in a Southeast Asian country based off of all the stuff that happened to it. Now, I can feel it, right? I can feel like, so you just want to talk about all the horrible stuff that happened? No. I want to talk about the fact that Raya and the Last Dragon was hashtag a bad movie, right? Just, it was a bad movie. I'm not saying it wasn't. However, I am saying that if you want to see really cool Southeast Asian representation and, like, they actually tell you, sit down and enjoy the ride, if you have Netflix or you know somebody who can take you on the open seas to get a Netflix subscription, Trece is actually a wonderful way to go, is because it does tell you all of the urban legends and myths of Southeast Asian Filipino culture. Myths, I might add, that sometimes cross over into other nationalities and countries, because the myth might be individually theirs, but the basis of it might just span entire continents based off of the reason for the myth. Like in one episode, you find out that a woman has been getting rid of her children without actually giving them a proper burial, and, like, actively denying that she even had them. This leads to that child literally turning into a monster that's designed to haunt her. Now, if you've played The Witcher, right, that is also a storyline in The Witcher. It's actually a myth in several different nations. The idea of children not being given their just reward for, like, their burials, coming back to haunt the family in question because they want a proper burial. Even if you never really say you're sorry, giving them a proper burial usually gets rid of them. That's really all they want. Also, in case anybody doesn't, like, endorse this, I have something else to sweeten the pot for you. Prince Zuko appears in 2 episodes of this. The second I heard him, when I first watched this, I spit out my drink and I literally was like, Prince Zuko? I was so amazed that he was in this, because I was like, man, Dante Bosco, I haven't heard you in a minute. Which is a good thing, right? I am glad that they used, it's like, no, we're using the one guy. We're using the one guy to really draw in it. But the actual anime itself and also the comic, if you can find them, are actually really well drawn and really well rendered, and it does have a lot of guts and gore, as I'm sure you've seen if you're watching the video. If you're only listening, it has a lot of guts and gore, but also it's an adventure more so than it is anything else. And you actually get to be with the main character, Alexandra, while she's figuring out her, like, mystery of the episode. It's really awesome. Like, I was more amazed about all this stuff that I didn't know about the Philippines. Like, from watching just even the anime and reading the comics, I was under the assumption that, like, the rest of the world across the pond, the Philippines would be driving on the left-hand side of the road. No. They actually drive on the right-hand side of the road. Which I was like, huh, neat. I didn't know that. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because Raya and the Last Dragon, supposedly, air quotes that, use Southeast Asian inspired stuff, but I've seen a lot of Southeast Asian creators on YouTube tear it apart and like say nothing but horrible things about it. And I'm gonna be completely honest, I watched it with my nibblings, right? Because they really wanted to watch it, and I realized something. Because it's a Disney property, they water down a lot of stuff to the point where you're like, I don't know what the message that we're trying to send is, but it seems hollow in comparison, right? It does. It seems incredibly hollow. Because the message of Raya and the Last Dragon was, you need to learn to trust people. That is a bad lesson to teach kids. You need to teach them trust has to be earned. And trust, once it's broken, is really hard to get back. Like, I understand letting them be open-minded, but that was a bad lesson that I feel like they were trying to shove on the kids. So I didn't like it. Now, Trece is not for kids, right? Gotta stress this. I would not let my nibblings watch this with me unless they were already like 15 or 16 and they could handle watching somebody literally get exploded. Then maybe I'd let them watch it with me. But this one really hammers in home the fact of it is so Southeast Asian inspired that literally she says Southeast Asian phrases while she's talking to other people in the community, and they never make mention of it until you realize, oh wait, that's not English, and it's not any kind of Spanish I've ever heard. Can't be French. French and Spanish are too close together. It must be native Philippine, which I was super, like, excited about, because I was like, oh, sweet. And then I looked up how you, like, start languages, like, on Duolingo, and I was like, oh no. I am a little scared to try and, like, dip my toe in it. And I'm gonna be completely honest. It's not a hard language to learn, I've heard, but it is one of those things where if you want to get good at it, you gotta get good at it. Again, I'm only singing this thing's praises is because the Philippines and in general, Southeast Asia as a whole, right, not just the Philippines, as a whole, has suffered greatly from really poor media representation. So, here's some kinda good representation if you want to watch it. Now again, I am not a Southeast Asian woman, right? I'm not. So if anybody of Southeast Asian origin comes on here and says, nope, it's bad, take their word for it, because, again, I'm just some white chick on the internet telling you stuff that I think about. It doesn't mean it's right. What else am I thinking about? Oh, I am thinking about telling you guys thank you so much for coming to today's video. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. A big shout out to the subscribers, the patrons, and all of you lovely viewers who have come to this video, maybe by happenstance. And also a big shout out to the fact that I have now finally learned how to edit more or less my own videos enough that I can give my editor a break so he can actually do his day job, because he got one. Air horn sirens, please. Beep, beep, beep. Yeah, that's really all we were talking about today, is Southeast Asian representation needs better representation. Sincerely, somebody who would like to learn more about different cultures other than the 6 we get to constantly run around in. Love, Hella Vitrum. Yeah, actually I think that's it. So without further ado, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, weekend, night, or whenever you're watching this, and I hope everything is going good for you.